him the meaning of a job well done, and that hard work built character. He smiled as memories from his childhood came to mind, and he allowed himself to travel down memory lane. After a few minutes of nostalgia, he went over to the other side of the barn to check on the other three. "No, we're supposed to paint over here!" Applebloom yelled to her companions. Superman let out another sigh. The fillies had more paint on them than the wall. They were once again arguing, this time about where the paint should go. He looked at the wall and found to his astonishment that only the very bottom was painted. He snapped his fingers and the three stopped fighting. "What are you doing over here?" Sweetie Belle asked. "I finished my side already." The three gasped and rushed over to where he had been painting. He could hear their cries of disbelief as they saw his work and how fast he had finished. They ran back over and started to question him. "How'd you do that so fast?" Applebloom asked in disbelief. "Because I actually worked hard. You should try it," Superman replied. The three fillies looked at him in confusion. "So how are we supposed to paint the barn as fast as you?" Scootaloo asked. "You can't," he replied. The three lowered their heads. But then Superman smiled and leaned in close to the three. "Unless you work together." Applebloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle looked at each other and then nodded. Walking back over to their brushes and picking them up, Superman watched them with a smile as the three painted the wall in a pretty fast time. Although Superman had to help them get up to the higher section, when they finished, the three stepped back and observed their handiwork. "It looks pretty good," Applebloom said while nodding. "Yeah, we did a good job," Scootaloo added. "I like it," Sweetie Belle said with a smile. Superman looked at them and smiled. "You all did a good job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go," Superman said, waving goodbye. He almost made it to the air this time when the three voices again stopped him. "Wait!" all three cried. "What is it?" Superman asked, politely turning around. "Well, we just wanted to thank you for saving my barn, and us," Applebloom said with a smile. The other two nodded in unison. Superman smiled gently at this and got on one knee, so he could look them in the eyes. "You're welcome." "Will we see you again?" Sweetie Belle asked. "Don't worry, I'll be around. But if you ever need my help, just call out for me and I'll be there," Superman answered with another smile. "Promise?" Scootaloo asked. "Promise." "Pinky promise?" Applebloom asked with a smile. Superman raised an eyebrow, but promised them again. "Now I want you to promise me something. Promise me you won't tell anyone about me. I'm not ready to face all the ponies yet. Promise?" "Promise." "Now I've got to go. Your sister's coming," he said, pointing down the road. The three fillies turned to look to where he was pointing. Sure enough, a small outline of an orange pony could be seen in the distance heading for the barn. They turned back to Superman, but he was gone. After a moment of looking for him, the three fillies decided to wait for Applejack. "Howdy, girls. What's up?" Applejack said to them when she arrived at the barn. Applebloom began, but AJ looked behind them at the barn and gasped. "I don't believe it," she whispered. "Applejack, we can explain. The three of y'all went and painted the barn." "Aw, thanks, sis, but you and your friends didn't have to go and do that." The fillies let out a collective sigh and smiled brightly for Applejack. But then Superman's words came back to them and their smiles turned to frowns. "Actually, sis, we didn't paint the barn," Applebloom muttered. Applejack looked at her in confusion. "Well, if you didn't, then who did?" "Well, we did paint the barn, but only after we set fire to it," Applebloom slowly said. AJ's face went blank. "Beg pardon?" The three struggled to get to the next part out. "Well, we were trying to get our cutie marks and fire safety," Applebloom began. "So we figured that a real fire would be more practical than a fake one," Sweetie Belle continued. "So we may have set fire to the barn in the process," Scootaloo finished. Applejack's face was blank as she listened to their story. Then the fillies tried for the positive side. "But we managed to keep the barn from burning down. And we repainted it, so it's like nothing ever happened. Applejack was still unmoved. All three of them sighed and hung their heads. How much trouble are we in? Applebloom asked. To her and the others' surprise, AJ pulled them all into a big hug. Aw, sis, I'm so proud of you. You told me the truth instead of lying and trying to ignore what happened. You're really growing up. Does this mean we're not in trouble? They all asked. Heck no! I said I was proud of you. I didn't say y'all were off the hook. Now let's go inside. Your punishment starts now. The three fillies sighed and slowly walked inside the house. AJ watched them go inside and smiled to herself. I'm not punishing you because you burned down the barn. I'm punishing you because you didn't tell me the whole truth. The three of y'all cause more trouble than you fix. Applejack said to herself with a smile. I know somebody helped you and kept y'all on track. I just don't know who. Applejack chuckled and walked inside the house, helping the fillies get started on their chores. As Superman flew away from where the fillies had been talking to Applejack, as she was called, he couldn't help but smile to himself as he picked up on their conversation. The little fillies had listened to him and had decided to tell the truth, even when it would have been easier to lie. He was glad to see that they were ponies of their word, so he knew his secret would be safe. But what Applejack had said afterwards worried him a bit. She knew that someone else had helped them. She was bright, that much was certain. Were all the ponies on this planet that bright? If so, he'd have to tread carefully and try not to upset any of them. Superman flew up until he was far above all the clouds, where the rays of the sun recharged him like a battery. When he looked at the sun's location, he was surprised to see that it was already noon. Working with those fillies had taken more time than he had thought. Though it had been fun, he looked back towards the planet and resumed flight, his senses tuned and his mind ready. Who else needed help